You need those relationships to be positive. People will be happy to see you. So if something comes up, the dentist is looking the other way because they're hoping it will be resolved on its own. But that's why I say hope is not a strategy. Just because people are adults, you cannot assume that they have the skills in communication and conflict management to solve things.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients Podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Lentau, and I'm really excited about our episode today. I first off want to thank our sponsors who allow me to come to your inbox every single Friday morning at 5 a.m. Eastern Time with a new episode. I want to thank both Dental Intelligence and CallRail for their continued support. I also want to remind everybody about my event, Supercharge Your Dental Practice. It is September 26th and 27th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida at Pier 66. You can go to the website superchargeyourdentalpractice.com. You can find out about the 13 speakers. We focus on the business side and marketing side of one's practice. This is the third year we're doing it, and we're really excited to bring it back to South Florida. So go to superchargeyourdentalpractice.com and use the code RAVING, R-A-V-I-N-G, to save $100 on your registration for the event. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me and I can help you and assist you in registering for the event. So today's episode is called Hope is Not a Strategy for a Great Practice Transition. We're talking to an Ombuds, and we're going to learn what an Ombuds is, and my guest is Dina Lynch Eisenberg. Dina's professional journey is marked by innovation and a deep commitment to positive change. She blends a dynamic mix of cutting-edge consulting strategies with 3 decades of experience across industries working with organizations like St. Jude's Children's Hospital, Polaroid, Coca-Cola, Bolthouse Farms, and Twitter, where she developed their Ombuds program and served as the inaugural Ombuds. Through her proprietary science-based Bridge framework, Dina delivers science-based actionable tools that transform the way organizations approach communication and conflict management. Her expertise has been showcased in Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur magazines, and her contributions to the field have earned her prestigious accolades, including being named one of the Boston's Business Journal's 40 Under 40 Business Leaders and receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award in Conflict Management. So please welcome to the Raving Patients Podcast, Dina Lynch Eisenberg. Dina, thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to our conversation. And, you know, one of the things I wanted to start off with before I kind of go into how you help dentists and those types of things. When we first met prior to us recording, I had no idea what an Ombuds was. I was like, what is that? I've never heard of that. And I think, I'm not guaranteeing it, but I think when people are listening to this episode, they're going to go, what's an Ombuds? So before we begin, can you kind of explain what an Ombuds is so people kind of understand what you do and the role you take in a practice, and then kind of go into how you got into dentistry?
Happy to. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me on, Len. I'm totally excited to talk with you and your listeners about Ombuds work, and particularly how it works out in the DSO space. My very favorite question is, what is an Ombuds? First of all, I have to give you some props because you said it correctly. Most people struggle with that word. It's Ombuds, and if that's going to be a troublesome spot for you, just say Ombuddy. All the same thing. So an Ombuds is a conflict management expert that specializes in organizational conflict. Organizations hire me to do 2 very important things for them. One, I act as an amplifier and a beacon to senior leadership so they understand what's happening in terms of employee experience, in terms of culture and morale, and whether or not they have any faulty policies or practices that are obstacles to growth to them. So, at the high end, you get an early warning system that releases pressure. And then at the everyday level, dealing with the staff, the doctors, all the providers, I'm that safe, neutral, confidential space that they can go to and really talk about anything that's work-related. So maybe that's sharing an interpersonal dispute and figuring out how to resolve that. Maybe that's sharing with me that there's a certain process that's not working for them, or a benefit that's not working for them, or maybe they have a great idea but they just don't know how to bring it up. The Ombuds is that person that sort of acts as a collector of information, listens deeply, and then provides those insights and that guidance. So really the whole community can benefit and elevate.
It makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I was unsure, and you obviously clarified it when we spoke. So again, just to kind of, before we get into more content part of it, can you kind of talk about how you got into dentistry and what your role in dentistry is, or why practices really, hire you to come into their practice?
Yeah, happy to do it. It's kind of a full circle moment, if you will, right? So I started my legal career in healthcare. I was holding doctors accountable for sexual misconduct and chemical dependencies. The folks I worked most with were women who had been sexually abused by their doctors. A very serious topic, and we know those things exist. And I really felt the difficult nature of these women. They had to tell their story over and over again to an audience that often didn't believe them. It was traumatic for them because they had trusted, a doctor who abused their trust, and oftentimes their family lives suffer because it's very hard to believe someone could maybe be that naive or unknowing. And so what I learned from those women was that, one, it takes a lot of courage to speak up, and that really what you need is someone to support you in doing that. So when I left the law, because that was a very emotionally draining experience, although I loved the work, it was hard to do, I still wanted to help people. So I went on to do some consulting work around conflict management and worked with banks like Bank of America and Bank Boston, and really loved doing the corporate side of things. I went on to work with Coca-Cola and Bolthouse Farms, as you mentioned, helping them develop conflict management programs. And then Twitter came calling, and they recruited me to start the very first Ombuds program in the tech space. And that was amazing because not only did I get to work with the domestic United States, all the employees in the States, but also globally. So EMEA and JPAC, and really understanding what conflict is like outside of the United States. And so when, they went boom, and they were acquired by that guy, I realized how difficult it was to go through an acquisition for the people involved. And since I'd done so many acquisitions with Bank of America, I felt like there was something I could add to the M&A space. When I started looking at the M&A space, I wanted to be in a place where I felt like I could have community, and that was the dental space.
Got it. And would you say and I think I may have asked this when we first chatted a few weeks ago, and I don't remember the answer, so I'm asking again. Is your focus mostly on DSOs then, because they're acquiring a lot of these practices, and obviously when a DSO comes in and purchases a practice, many times the doctor stays on. Sometimes they don't, but in many cases they do. And there is obviously when they remain the dentist but not the decision maker necessarily. They make promises. The DSO makes promises to the practice they aren't going to change anything, and then they change things, and that causes potentially a lot of conflict in the office. So is that where your main focus is, or you also work with, I want to say, solo practitioners or smaller practices?
I mainly focus on lower mid-market DSOs and group practices. I think there's a lot of need in that segment because you're wanting to grow and you want to do it with a great foundation and reduce any obstacles to growth. So that's where I'm focused. I actually am creating some projects and some products for solo practices too, because I think when you're the owner and you also have to be everything else, it's difficult to actually hold people accountable. So we're coming out with some things for that group too. And
so you would say you're 3 to 8, 10 locations, that's your sweet spot then?
Yeah, my sweet spot actually is 5 to 50.
5 to 50 locations. Okay, got it. All right. So let's talk about, and this necessarily wasn't on our conversations, but I'm curious. Can we talk about some of the more common conflicts that you are dealing with when you're dealing with these organizations. I'm just use some examples. You don't have to go into real details, but some things that seem to come up more often. That way, if someone's listening to this and they say, "Oh, that happens in my practice," they know they're not they know they're not one of the only people who has that conflict. So I'm just curious. Can you pick or choose a couple of different conflicts and just go into them fairly quickly?
Happy to do that. I will state right from the beginning that one of the things that I practice, and I practice very truthfully and promise my clients, is that I'm going to protect their privacy. So absolutely no names.
No, I don't want names. It was more generalization,
right.
Just topics.
All right. So the first one that comes to mind is there's a acquisition, and the legacy company is very excited about the new target that they're going to bring in, but they haven't really tried to make the target company comfortable, right? They're just assuming they're going to come in and they're going to do everything and then it's going to be aligned. They liked the owner and they figure, okay, we like this guy, everything else will work. But they haven't really done any communication. They haven't really reached out to understand what kind of culture. And I'll just say that that's not my favorite word. I don't like to say culture. I think that it confuses people and makes them delay into action because they're not certain what that culture is. I like to say community instead. And I say community because we are all parts of different kinds of communities and we understand what that interaction is like, right? So they haven't prepared for the new community that's going to join them. Sometimes when the new community joins, they bring good things, right? That's the reason for acquiring that target. And legacy staff is like, no, this is the way we do it. You know, we're just not changing. New staff is like, why do we need to do it this way? It worked fine the way it was. And the doctor is kind of stuck because lots of times they haven't made it clear that there's going to be a sale. And so kind of stuck between their folks and the new folks and trying to be loyal to both causes just issues around accountability. So that's one example. Another example is what happens when you bring on a new associate dentist. So someone who's just out of grad school, out of dental school, and they join the practice, and the owner says, okay, well, the person who's going to be reviewing your treatment plans is the dental assistant. And the dental assistant is, maybe not be as open or as kind or as patient with the new doc. They're really not giving them a lot of help when they're looking at the treatment plans in terms of getting closer to the philosophy of medicine of that office. And they just basically make the new doc feel dumb and unprepared, which, is just the worst thing because there's a lot of stress about being good at your job right from the beginning. And you need someone to encourage you, not, hold you out with your feet over the fire trying to get a good treatment plan. So that's something that comes up often, is helping people in that situation using mediation to understand what's the purpose here and how are we acting towards that purpose, right?
Got it. Thank you for those examples. They both make sense. So I think one of the things I was intrigued about when we spoke originally was, and I think I explained to you situations in my own office that we're so focused on doing dentistry, we're so focused on treating patients properly and running the business side of the practice, and there obviously are conflicts that arise, but dentists don't really deal with those conflicts when they happen, and then they build up, and then they build up, and then they have a blow up because the previous situations haven't been fixed or aligned. Do you see that happening a lot? What is your suggestions for that? Because that's where the practice becomes less efficient, when there's these huge conflicts between departments or between the way they're being spoken to. I mean, there's so many different things that can happen. So I'm just curious, if you see that quite often, that the dentist chooses to ignore these conflicts and then they blow up and they cause further problems.
Yeah, the dentist says, you know what, I'm just going to wait and see how this works out. And while they're waiting for things to blow over, they actually just blow up. And it gets so much worse. And the reason I can relate to this so much is because the educational path of lawyers and dentists are fairly similar, right? When we're in school, the whole deal is, can you become an expert technician? We want you to learn how to do the work, And so you practice, you worry, you study, and by the time you leave, you are a top-notch technician. But what you are not is skilled at managing other people or running a business. And those are things you're supposed to learn afterwards. And that's where the conflict comes in, because there isn't any training around communication. There isn't any training around conflict management or leading a team. You're supposed to figure that out on your own. And if you think about it, the dentist is in kind of a hard position just like the lawyer, which is, how many people are saying, gosh, I cannot wait to go to the dentist? Not many. Most people are saying the other things. Well, I'd rather do anything else but go to the dentist. That is a very tough day-to-day environment to be in. So dentists already know that the folks who are coming to see them are maybe a little less happy about that. So it makes it maybe a little bit of a depressing experience for them. And so they want to make sure there are teams like them and that they're getting along and that they're not doing anything that's going to damage the relationships, because, that office manager or the hygienist, anybody in the front desk, those are people that dentists have to interact with every day. You need those relationships to be positive. People will be happy to see you. So if something comes up, the dentist is looking the other way because they're hoping it will be resolved on its own. But that's why I say hope is not a strategy. Just because people are adults, you can assume that they have the skills in communication and conflict management to solve things. I've been recommending to dentists that one of the things I think would be an amazing thing to do if you're somebody who does not like conflict is to, one, take a conflict assessment to figure out where you are in the world. We all have two styles, our primary style and a backup style, so you want to know both of those. And then two, take a mediation course. It's 40 hours. It's very, very useful because you will learn to get comfortable with conflict. You'll learn how to approach conversations successfully. Inviting people to a conversation is much different than forcing them to have that conversation whether they want to or not. It gives you a chance to manage your own emotions, right? Most of us have had experiences with bad managers. And if you've had a bad experience, you don't want to give that to somebody else. It makes you a hesitant leader. So spending a little time improving your mediation skills makes it a lot easier for you to deal with conflict that's in your practice. Got it.
So someone may be listening to this and they say, well, I have HR and HR can do that. That's why I have an HR department. They can handle that. But can HR handle the issues? And if not, what are the differences between HR and an Ombuds? And why do practices need both of them?
Well, the truth of the matter is your HR person is probably very skilled at the parts of their job that are their job. So policies, procedures, compliance, administration, those things. But they're generally not trained to do any conflict management work. When they're usually working in that realm, they're using their personal experiences. And so that might not be the best techniques to work with people in the practice who are in conflict. Also, they're not neutral, right? The HR person works for the practice, so they are not neutral. So when they get involved, that person knows, well, this is the person who's in charge of my paid time off, or my salary, or any other accommodation I need. And now I'm going to tell them I'm in conflict, that I look like a troublemaker, that maybe they should just get rid of me. So it makes it very hard for employees to actually reach out and tell the truth. What the HR person gets is the polished version, right? This is a version that's not going to get me in any trouble when I'm telling you about this issue. The difference is with confidentiality and Ombuds. So HR people have conditional confidentiality. If a certain word like harassment comes up, it is out of their hands. They have a procedure that they have to follow, right? Difference is Ombuds are independent, not part of the power structure of the practice, so not a senior leader, but at the same level of the senior leader. Totally neutral, so this person cannot impact anything around your salary, your opportunities, or anything like that. Ombuds are by code required to keep what they hear confidential, right? So unless someone tells me they're going to hurt themselves or hurt somebody else, If they say, I don't want you to tell anybody, I cannot tell anybody, right? So you're getting a much closer relationship because people feel like they can be honest and say what's really happening. The Ombuds actually knows your policies and procedures, so they're able to give somebody that resource and say, here's when you go back to HR, how you might want to handle it.
Does an Ombuds work temporarily with an office or a practice? Do they work on a long-term, like just a contract? What is the normal relationship that you have with these organizations?
Sure. I've been so blessed because I've worked across industries to do both types of ombudsing. So I've been in embedded ombuds, which means the organization hires me as an employee with the understanding that there are certain things they can't ask me about, and I report directly to the CEO or the president. Right now, I'm actually doing a lot more fractional work. What that means is the practice hires me for a number of hours on a monthly basis, on a retainer basis, so that they get 17 hours or 25 hours, and that's based on what's going on in their practice because we customize that. And then they have access to me, everybody in their network, so anybody within the DSOs network has access and call up and say, Dina, this is what's going on, and I need that. And typically work on an 18-month cycle, because when we start a new program, the first 6 months, really, people are so skeptical about how could it be that you're not sharing my name and my information. They need somebody else to go first and get some ambassadors about this actually works, it helped me. And so the first 6 months is just settling in, and then we have a whole year before we get to the end of the year, and we can look back and see what savings we've had.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think ultimately bringing someone in, they're obviously going to pay you for your time in this case. But I think that conflicts in practices costs a lot of money to the practice. So ultimately, they're going to save more money because they're going to have you come in as a mediator, not as you're not taking sides here. You're in the middle, and you're going to help really, I guess you can say, I don't want to say avoid conflict, but deal with the conflict that occurs, because I don't think anybody can actually avoid conflict because it's just part of a practice, but you're there to at least deal with it. And you take the onus off the practice owner, who, like I said, is their job is to treat patients, not necessarily deal with the conflict in the practice.
Right. I think that's exactly right. And sometimes the practice owner doesn't understand that sometimes they're causing some of the conflict, and they need a neutral person to be able to say, look, I looked from the outside, here's what I'm seeing, here are the gaps, here's what you can do to solve those gaps, and here's how I'm going to help you make that transition. And it's really useful because when does the practice owner have someone who is there just for them, to listen to what's going on? It's hard to manage people and keep your emotions in check. You need that safe space, that soft landing as the owner to get through some of the things you have to do. Not to mention, helping the team do better.
Got it. And then what have you found is the other side of the spectrum, which is for practices that don't take action, they don't, we'll call it inaction, they do nothing about it. How do you find that from a financial perspective happening, and even just how the practice culture is and those types of things?
Yeah, I don't think people realize just how expensive unresolved conflict is and how many pieces of the business that it actually touches. So just looking at the numbers, if you lose one associate dentist, the numbers say it could be up to $320K for that loss when you consider the recruitment, the onboarding, the lost productivity. Now it's about 12 months to find a new associate. So you are going to have problems for a long time. It's going to be very expensive. And it's not just one associate that leaves. When you look at the ADA's HPI studies, what they say is that if there's a mismatch in culture, the associate is likely to leave after 12 months. Now, did you get your money's worth in 12 months? Absolutely not, right? You're spending that time with that new dentist, training them, getting them acclimated to your system. Maybe 3 months of that was actually really productive time. You need them to stay longer than that. And you can do that by creating an environment that's healthy, where they feel seen, heard, valued, and celebrated, that makes them feel like they have growth opportunities. to improve their skills and really makes them feel like they're contributing to the success of the practice.
Got it. Now that makes a lot of sense. So is there anything that you wanted to cover that we haven't covered? I think we went through a lot of different topics here. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to cover?
Yeah, I think I'd just like to talk a little bit more about the holistic organization. So organizational health is something every DSO should be focusing on right now. We're probably in the most unprecedented, really just anxious time. Everybody, and I mean everybody, is upset about something at some point, and they're going to bring those emotions to the office. They're going to have conversations about politics. The other day I heard I work with an organization where one hygienist was asking people, do you like red? And that's a kind of a weird question, right? Well, she was using that question to figure out your politics. If you said you liked red, she just assumed, okay, you're probably MAGA leaning, right? You want to be able to have a way to deal with those kinds of situations because that is impacting your organizational health. If you're not healthy, you can't recruit the top candidates. You can't even retain the A players that you have. And so for right now, it's really urgent to focus on what kind of environment do we have? Is it healthy or less than healthy? And what are we proactively doing to make it healthier, both for our teams, but also for our patients?
Got it. All right. So as we'll segue away from the content, we'll work on our fun part of the seminar or podcast, which is my lightning round Q&A, and then we'll get your contact information. We'll find out how practices can learn more about your services, and after that's done. So for those that have not listened to any of my podcasts before, I do a lightning round Q&A with the guests. I use an app called Poddex, and we pull out business-related questions, so all appropriate stuff. So Dina, first question here, and we're going to go through 8 to 10 of these fairly quickly.
All right.
How do you capture and keep track of ideas? Do you keep a notebook? Do you do voice memos? What's your method?
For the longest time, I kept a notebook. I still keep a notebook because I think handwriting makes you remember longer.
Okay. How many hours a day do you work on average?
6.
Okay. What profession do you think is the most undervalued today?
Would it be wrong if I said mine? Ombuds are way undervalued.
Okay. What deserves all your attention but seldom gets it because of your busy lifestyle?
Having fun.
Okay. Let's see what we got here. What book should you go back and reread as it's made a great impact on you the first time you read it?
Oh, this is such a great book. I hope everybody reads it. It's called Difficult Conversations, How to Say What Matters Most by Bruce Patton.
So Difficult Conversations by Bruce Patton. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. How do you distinguish yourself, in this case, from other ombuds?
I think I'm distinguished from other ombuds, and someone called me a change maker because I really pursued the corporate path. Most other ombuds are either in academic or federal settings, and so I'm one of the few ombuds that's in a corporate setting.
Got it. Who has been your greatest inspiration?
Whoopi Goldberg.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Okay. Let's see. What do we got here? What do you think your unique skill is that has helped make you successful or have you become successful?
I think my most unique skill is my calm energy, which allows people to relax and trust me and tell me the things they need to tell me.
I think as an ombud, you have to have a relaxed demeanor. I like guests who are, excitable. You seem like you're so calm and composed. Exactly. Totally different than I could never be an ombud. So that's funny. All right, let's see what else we got here. Do you keep a journal and does it help you?
I do. I keep an electronic journal now. I've actually been journaling since 13.
Got it. Do you have a favorite business podcast?
Yeah. Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett.
You're good with these answers that require you to pick one thing out of it. So let's see. What else do we got here? When you were a kid, what was the first thing you wanted to be when you grew up?
Obstetrician.
Oh, OBGYN, okay.
Yep.
Has anyone in your network been important on your journey?
Gosh. Yes, but there are way too many people to name at different parts of my journey, so I'll just say yes.
Okay. Two last questions. What 3 adjectives describe your strengths?
That's a toughie. Integrity, curiosity, and resilience.
Good answers there. And last question, I ask this to every single guest of mine. What is one subscription, something you pay for on a monthly or annual basis, okay, that's a subscription, either business or personal, that you cannot live without?
Audible.
You read Audible books, got it.
Yeah.
Great. That was awesome, Dina. Thank you. You did a really good job. So, Dina, if somebody is listening to this podcast, they're having conflicts in their practice or in their group setting, and they want to reach out to learn more, what's the best way they can do that? And I know you said you wanted to offer something to the listeners, so can you just kind of summarize those questions there?
Absolutely. So folks are curious about Ombuds or wanting to maybe explore an Ombuds function, please do one of 2 things. Either connect with me on LinkedIn, I love to connect there, or shoot me an email at hello@happypracticeconsulting.com. One of the things I've really been noticing is that it's hard maybe sometimes to step up and acknowledge that you have issues going on in the practice. So I created a self-assessment for DSO leaders that's going to be available on May 1st. You can take the quiz and it will let you know how well aligned your DSO is.
That's awesome. And this was great. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I really appreciated you kind of sharing your expertise in something that I'm not sure anybody's going to really know about. So that's really good. I like bringing these things to the industry. Guys, if you think Dina can actually help your practice or group, please reach out to her. She gave her contact information. I always like to thank the sponsors, both Dental Intelligence and CallRail, for their support. And I want to remind everybody about my event, Supercharge Your Dental Practice. It's in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, September 26th and 27th. You can go to superchargeyourdentalpractice.com to learn more. And as I end every single one of my episodes, remember, your reputation matters. Dina, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thank you, Len.